37, he's the youngest candidate in the Democratic field running for president, but South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg thinks his experience as the chief executive of that city and his time serving in Afghanistan have given him a perspective to move the country forward. Mayor Pete, as he's called, is our guest here this morning on Close Up. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about this. You're the mayor of a mid-sized American city, about 100,000 people in South Bend.
That's right.
How do you make the leap to leader of the free world with the nuclear codes?
Well, look, nobody walks into the Oval Office on day one with any direct personal idea of what it's like to be in those shoes. And I recognize the audacity of, frankly, anybody at my age or any other age seeking that office. And yet, every single person we've elected to that office has been somebody, a human being, who has brought a certain amount of experience and perspective to the job. My experience is non-traditional, but I think it's highly relevant. First of all, I think executive experience is especially important right now. And I also think the experience of leading a city of any size, but especially a city like ours that is in many ways typical of so many communities that felt left behind by the process in the last 10 or for that matter 40 years, and leading it to growth after a period when we were classified as one of America's dying communities. I think that's exactly the kind of experience we need more of in Washington, so that we can have eventually the capital begin to look more like our best run cities and towns instead of the other way around.
So much of what we talk about in primary politics is this insider-outsider dynamic. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Obviously, you're only a mayor, but you've been involved in politics for a long time. So do you consider yourself insider or outsider?
Well, I suppose I'm an outsider to Washington. I don't get up in the morning and go to work there every day, but I'm no stranger to the process. I'm certainly no stranger to governing. I've built a track record of executive experience, including working with now 3 different Republican governors, but also standing up to them when something was being done that wasn't right, especially the confrontation we had with Mike Pence when he was governor, passing some pretty backward legislation in our state in 2015. More importantly, I think that just the life experience of coming from a community like ours, but also being from the generation that I'm from. You know, somebody who was in high school when the Columbine shooting happened and understands what it means to grow up with school shootings as the norm. Somebody who was one of those troops, like so many in my generation, who was sent to conflict in the wars after 9/11, and has a personal stake in what's going to happen with climate change and fiscal policy and other issues that are going to come due in 20, 30, 40, 50 during my lifetime.
You mentioned Columbine. What have you done in South Bend that you can point to say, we've done something about gun violence?
Well, in South Bend, we implemented a group violence intervention strategy, and we think it's been very effective in helping to contain the epidemic of gun violence that's affected so many cities. We're not satisfied with where we are, but rates of gun murder are down by more than half from what they were like when I was a kid growing up in South Bend. It was a very difficult and complex approach to put together. It involved a lot of consulting outside experts, unifying federal, local, and state officials on the law enforcement side, and really working with the community, including the faith community, and social services for an all-hands-on-deck approach. But the truth is, it feels to mayors like me like we're often fighting violence with one hand tied behind our back, because the state won't allow us to implement even widely popular, constitutionally tested, common-sense approaches on gun violence.
Red flag laws, where do you stand on those? Some people are concerned that there's not enough due process within those kind of laws to allow people to get their guns back, say, if they've been taken away.
I think it's common sense that if somebody, for example, has a pattern of domestic violence, then that should be flagged, and that should make it harder for them to get a weapon. We can talk about implementation concerns or fine-tuning the policy, but I can't imagine it should be controversial that somebody who is flagged as having a propensity for violence or a criminal record or terrorist ties should not be able to easily acquire a weapon that could be used to harm Americans. This is a security issue. And again, we can support the Second Amendment and also, as we always have as a country, recognize that certain reasonable checks and safeties need to be part of the process in order to keep us safe. And we can check state by state which policies have worked better than others and which ones have led some states to have much better rates when it comes to gun violence than other states.
Having served in a war zone in Afghanistan, how would that service inform your leadership in the Oval Office in terms of deciding when and where to deploy American troops?
Well, as somebody who was one of those troops, I believe that the next president has to have a much clearer and higher standard for when to use U.S. military force overseas. I was especially troubled recently to see the current National Security Advisor seeming to hint that they would entertain committing U.S. troops to South America to deal with the Venezuela situation, that however serious it is not one, in my view, that rises to that standard. And we have to be ready to to put an end to endless war. You know, you could be old enough to enlist now and not have even been alive on 9/11. And yet we have people operating in multiple theaters, including places like East Africa, based on a congressional authorization that dates back to dealing with 9/11. There is no real policy right now in this White House or in this administration when it comes to foreign policy writ large, but also the standards that we're going to use for U.S. troops being deployed abroad. And that really does concern me.
You mentioned Venezuela. What should the United States be doing in relation to Maduro? Do you think that we should take a policy trying to move him out, basically?
Well, it's certainly the case that the Maduro regime has lost its legitimacy, and that's why you see so many countries, not just the U.S., declining to continue to acknowledge that regime. We also have to recognize that our tools should be used in a targeted way. So when it comes to something like sanctions, they're certainly a legitimate part of our policy toolkit. In my view, they ought to be very targeted, and they ought to have a goal. Not so much that we in the United States pick and choose who the leaders of other countries will be, but I think we do have an interest, and the international community has an interest, in free and fair elections so that Venezuela can have self-determination and a legitimate government that is elected by the Venezuelan people that can take its place, reassert its place in the community of nations.
Back on the home front, do you believe that people who want to go to college should be able to do so for free, paid for by the government?
I certainly believe we have to reduce college costs. I haven't seen a convincing explanation of how we could wipe away all costs for everyone, but let's be realistic. It's just not possible to get ahead for many, many people with college costs structured the way they are. This is personal for me. We're living with a lot of student debt in my household, and so we need to make sure that interest rates for student debt are under control. We need to make sure that Pell Grants can cover a higher share of college costs. We need to reduce college costs overall, including being willing to subsidize them at a higher rate. And frankly, the federal government should be encouraging states to do more. You know, I'm aware that I'm in the state of New Hampshire, where even in-state college tuition is higher than out-of-state college tuition might be for a lot of others. When you do that, it might seem like a short-term savings, but what you're really doing is robbing yourself of a future generation that may feel that it has to leave in order to find opportunity. And so this is a great example of how the world looks a little bit differently if you're thinking about it in the long term and trying to make sure we're making policies today that will benefit us, our states and our country, in, let's say, 2054, when I get to the current age of the current president.
Your hometown is also home to the University of Notre Dame, one of the most celebrated football programs in the history of the sport. Do you believe that NCAA athletes in those top earning sports should be compensated for what they do?
I think it's a healthy discussion to have. I haven't reached a considered conclusion about where it should go, but to the extent that this is turning into a business, we have to ask whether we're doing right by these student athletes. Obviously, the scholarship model means a lot of value is earned by these students, but we also should have to ask if they're being monetized, what rights that they might have over the revenue that comes from that.
Healthcare policy. How do you pay for a public option on healthcare?
Well, if we have the public option developed to where more and more people are able to get on a more efficient system, we should see healthcare costs going down as a result. You know, the U.S. healthcare system is not even close to being the most efficient. As a matter of fact, the reverse is true. Among developed nations, we're one of the worst when it comes to the share of our healthcare dollar that goes not into patient care, but into bureaucracy and processing. I believe that if we expand access to healthcare, then we will be able to see greater purchasing power and rate setting that will enable us to help get more of those costs under control. Plus, we also have to make sure that we're doing technical improvements to a system, even for those who are on Medicare today, that is far too complex, especially under the hood. Far too much paper, far too many hands touching individual pieces of the process that really could be automated in a way that would mean that more of our dollar goes to patient care and less dollars have to go into healthcare at all.
You're from Indiana, but you went to Harvard, and you've actually spent some time in New Hampshire as a volunteer for political campaigns. What's your experience and sense of the New Hampshire voter?
Well, the biggest thing I've noticed is how seriously voters here take the responsibility that comes with that first-in-the-nation status. You can tell by the questions that you get. They're not parochial or short-sighted questions. They're deep and searching questions about the future of our party and the future of our country, the nature of American leadership in the world, the kinds of questions that 2020 candidates should be able to answer. But I also think there's an expectation of a more human dimension. We're supposed to just get to know each other as people before we get to know each other over the airways. It's one of the things I really value about the process and the way that the early states work, compelling all of us who want to be considered for this office to really demonstrate not just what we think, but who we are and what we're like. And I'm just at the outset, I think, of building that relationship with New Hampshire voters, and I'm looking forward to developing it as we go.
All right, Mayor Pete Buttigieg will be getting to know you better as well.
I hope so.
Right. Thanks for your time today on Close Up.